It's hard to believe, but the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, had a crush on a girl half his age. When Priscilla was just 14, she was determined to meet Elvis. She went through an airman to set it up. We don't know exactly what happened between them, but Priscilla kept seeing Elvis, longing to finally meet the star she idolized. This wasn't an isolated case. Many rock stars of the era seemed to have a thing for young girls. Songs from that time often talked about loving someone who is still a child. For example, Roy Orbison sang about a lovely woman child, and Gary Puckett's song, Young Girl, Get Out of My Life, was all about wanting a young girl to leave his life. Other songs like Go Away Little Girl by Steve Lawrence and Mark Winter and Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon by Neil Diamond and Cliff Richard echoed similar themes. These songs weren't about wrongdoing, but reflected the fantasies of young fans who loved the idea of romance with someone still growing up. Songs with 16 in the title also became popular. 16 Candles and Happy Birthday Sweet 16 captured the imagination of young listeners. A British vicar even tried to ban Neil Sedaka's song because he saw it as targeting a specific age in a way that felt inappropriate. PJ Proby, a rocker from the UK, was friends with Elvis and knew about his relationship with Priscilla. He thought it was normal given how the tabloids went wild over his own young girlfriend, but things were different for Priscilla. Her mother and stepfather seemed to encourage her relationship with the 24-year-old Elvis, a man widely seen as a sex symbol. It was concerning, especially since Elvis was known to give her drugs and had serious interactions with her that went beyond friendship. There's no doubt that Elvis knew his actions could be seen as wrong. While we don't know exactly what happened in private, it's clear that things were very risky. Priscilla's autobiography, written years later, tries to paint Elvis in a good light but still hints at how close they came to crossing a line. Her description of their relationship being chaste but awfully close to consummation raises serious questions. By March 1960, Elvis was back in the spotlight, but the rock and roll scene had changed. Most of the original rock stars were either inactive or had transformed into more mainstream acts. The new trend was clean-cut young men singing soft, melodic songs, often performed on TV shows like American Bandstand. This show, hosted by the slick and commercial-minded Dick Clark, showcased dancers who became stars in their own right. British producer Jack Good found American Bandstand boring and commercial. He believed it stifled true rock and roll energy. Meanwhile, in the tri-state area, a new wave of rockers emerged, many with Italian roots, influenced by artists like Elvis and Al Martino. This was a far cry from the rebellious spirit of the mid-1950s. Ricky Nelson became a key figure in this new era. He was smooth and popular, often performing on family shows where young musicians like James Burton could showcase their talents. In 1958, Ricky Nelson topped the charts with Poor Little Fool. There was even a dispute over who really wrote the song, but the story goes that a 16-year-old claimed authorship, and Ricky Nelson settled it with a dinner invitation, diffusing the tension. Other artists like Bobby Darin, Bobby V, and Bobby Rydell dominated the charts. Bobby Darin in particular was seen as a standout, with a polished act that went beyond just rock and roll. Neil Sedaka praised him as a class act, someone he admired and wanted to emulate. This shift in the music scene marked a departure from the wild, rebellious image of early rock and roll. Elvis's return in 1960 was seen as a return to a more controlled and less threatening form of the genre. The era of the Bobby Soxers was over, and a new, more sanitized wave of rock stars had taken over. In the early 1960s, the music scene was changing fast. Teen idols like Fabian and Bobby V were all the rage, but something new and exciting was on the horizon. Elvis Presley, after serving in the army, was back and ready to make music again. His first session after coming back was in Nashville, and it was going to be big. Elvis was no longer the carefree young man from Memphis. He had been through a lot and it showed in his music, but he still had that magic. He got together with his old friends like Scotty Moore on guitar and Hank Garland on violin. The rest of the band was top-notch, with DJ Fontana and Buddy Harman on drums and Floyd Kramer at the piano. This group was like the who's who of Nashville musicians. Their first song that day was Make Me Know It, written by Otis Blackwell. It was similar to another hit, Don't Be Cruel, in that it was about a guy trying to show his feelings. But to be honest, at first it didn't make complete sense. Elvis sang about going ahead and showing it, but the words didn't quite fit together perfectly. Elvis had a new sound going on. Gone were the rough edges of his earlier days. This was a more polished, mature sound. It showed he had grown as an artist. The session went late into the night, from 8 p.m. until 5:30 a.m. They managed to record 6 songs, all of which would become hits. This new sound was a mix of what was happening in music at the time. In the 1950s, rock and roll was seen as rebellious and raw, with artists like Eddie Cochran and Ronnie Hawkins pushing boundaries. But by the early 60s, things had changed. Major record labels took control, and the music became more tamed and socially acceptable. For Elvis, this meant a shift back to his roots, but with a new maturity. The songs he chose were more thoughtful, yet still had that Elvis flair. Make Me Know It was an example of this blend. It had that familiar Elvis vibe, but with a more refined touch. The music world was also seeing a change in the kind of songs being written and recorded. Gone were the days where a singer would never play the part of the loser. Songs like Run to Him by Bobby V showed a different side, where the singer was more of a sweetheart. Elvis, however, continued to walk that fine line, sometimes playing the role of the heartbroken lover, other times showing strength and resilience. As Elvis stepped back into the music scene, it was clear that things were evolving. The teen idols of the late 50s were still popular, but there was a new depth to the music. Elvis was part of this shift, bringing his unique style and unwavering talent. His return was a sign that rock and roll was here to stay, even as it adapted to the changing times. In this new era of music, Elvis stood out for his ability to blend different styles and emotions. He wasn't just a singer, he was a showman, captivating audiences with his presence and voice. As he began this new chapter in his career, it was evident that Elvis Presley was an unstoppable force, ready to leave his mark on music once again. Elvis Presley's comeback was like a fresh start. After serving in the army, he returned to music with a bang. One of his first big songs was Soldier Boy. This song was special because it had a beautiful, sad melody. Elvis had thought about it for a while, and even though he didn't finish recording it fully, it was still great. We missed out on hearing it fully because there were extra bits that weren't used, like Elvis whistling the tune. It would have been nice to have that as a bonus. Another song by John Leslie McFarland, Stuck on You, was like a sequel to Elvis's All Shook Up. Some critics didn't think it was his best work, but over time, it grew on people. It's now seen as a fantastic doo-wop song, even for someone who wasn't strictly a doo-wop artist. In 1964, Elvis worked with songwriters Mort Schumann and John Leslie McFarland. They created Little Children, a song that Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas recorded first. Mort Schumann was quite an interesting character. He was known for being wild and had done some strange things, like stealing a mummy and a horse. Yet he wrote great songs, including Little Children and Stuck on You. He worked with Aaron Schroeder, who had a fancy style but teamed up with Schumann to create something special. Elvis also recorded It Feels So Right and Fame and Fortune. These songs had a blues feel to them and were in the style of some of his earlier hits. A standout moment was A Mess of Blues. This song was a return to Elvis's roots. It was bluesy and driving, showing off his versatility. Mort Schumann said he came up with the idea, playing on the word mess and the blues genre. Elvis had to share some of his earnings with Elvis Presley Enterprises, which humorously was called the Elvis Tax by Doc Pomus, one of his songwriters. Despite this, Elvis was still managing to make money and was in great spirits. He even got his first black belt in karate around this time. To promote his new single, Stuck on You, Elvis appeared on Frank Sinatra's TV special. It wasn't the most exciting show, but it helped boost Sinatra's ratings. The two stars swapped songs, though neither seemed entirely at ease. Despite this, the show was watched by a large audience, making it a success. The release of Stuck on You was a huge hit. It sold 1 million copies quickly and was at the top of the charts for 4 weeks. It was followed by Fame and Fortune, which did well too. RCA Records was so happy with these sales that they rushed to make a new album, titled Elvis is Back. The album session was busy. Elvis recorded many songs, including some written by familiar names like the Everly Brothers and Doc Pomus. A key player was Boots Randolph, known for yakety sax, who added his talent to several tracks. Elvis worked well with different styles, showing he was at his best when he tried new things. Despite the success of Elvis is Back, it couldn't beat the Kingston Trio's album Sold Out on the charts. However, Elvis's album was still very successful and showed how versatile he was as an artist. He could sing in different styles and moods, proving he was still a major force in music. In the end, Elvis's return was a significant moment in music history. He proved that after a break, he could still captivate audiences with his voice and talent. The songs and albums from this period remain beloved by fans, showing the enduring appeal of Elvis Presley's music.